Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to my seminar. I'm Gary Sinclair with Standing Stone Ministries. Back in 2005, after Hurricane Katrina hit, I went to Mobile, Alabama for a few days to see the damage and help some people from our church who are working there. Well, as we drove from place to place, I noticed one thing in common in most areas. Everything had been flattened. It looked like a nuclear bomb or something had exploded there. I don't think I saw even one building still standing for miles, at least in one or two areas. But this past year, Fort Myers, Florida experienced its own devastating hurricane, one of the top three worst in their history, I believe. But I noticed something when I looked at pictures of Fort Myers. While the damage was still extensive, there were far more buildings and homes still standing, in spite of the massive power of that storm as well. What was the difference? Well, in major part, it was that Fort Myers had strengthened their foundations over the years. The area around New Orleans certainly prepared as well as they knew 18 years ago. And yes, Katrina was a slightly stronger storm. However, the foundational work in Florida was designed to withstand far greater winds, rain, and flooding, and that saved not only buildings, but most likely lives. You see, strong foundations are needed even in our emotional and spiritual homes, our hearts, our minds, our attitudes. The better prepared we are, the more we have to stand on, the stronger will be our foundations, and the better we'll handle the tough challenges of ministry life. And we all know there are many of those. So with our limited time, let me talk about where you might start to prepare, or you could add to what you're already doing to have strong emotional and spiritual foundations. What are a few of the key thoughts, the actions, and habits that will keep us standing when we hit the potholes on our ministry road, or the big rapids of criticism and disappointment and even loss in our raging ministry rivers? Now, of course, I'm going to assume that we have regular personal habits and practices like prayer, strategic and impactful Bible study, and worshiping God with other believers and in our alone time. We need those regular reminders that our God is great, that He forgives, that He loves us unconditionally. But we need the foundation of the Bible's truth and time with God and being refilled by the Spirit to help us do the things I'm going to suggest today. Because those activities alone can become something we do, just because we know they're important or we're supposed to do them, but they really don't impact and change our core thinking or our attitudes or responses. Remember, Scripture says, "For as a person thinks within, so they are." Book of Proverbs. Or Romans 12:2 says that real change involves a renewing of the mind, how we think. So I want to give us several essential thoughts that Scripture teaches that are vital in a firm foundation for ministry and life in general. So hang on, we're going to go quickly, but I hope these will be really helpful. Number one, we need to live and lead as to please and ultimately obey one person there in your church or ministry audience. And who is that? Well, it's kind of obvious, but we miss it sometimes. It's Jesus. Now, we should all be kind and loving and have a servant's heart. I'll talk about serving more in a few minutes. But when it comes to pleasing or being good enough, see, there's only one person who needs to approve. That means that when we get disapproval or pushback from someone, or maybe even a group of leaders, we're freer to discuss the concerns, admit when we're wrong, have a meaningful discussion, but also suggest, if needed, that we got to disagree or agree to disagree. See, we can do that if we're not trying to please everybody. See, for some reason, so many people in ministry are people pleasers. I've been there. But as a result, they don't have hard conversations. They don't challenge the staff to get better. They let things slide. And when hard times come, they're fearful, not helpful. They're quiet instead of initiating solutions. Why? Because they're afraid someone will be unhappy with them. But when we know that there's only one person to please, at least completely, we don't need to win the argument or prove the others wrong, but can encourage dialogue and working together and wise resolution and not fight over the details. We're going to make way more progress, and we're not going to get into a hand-to-hand, head-to-head fighting match. Leaders lead, and they initiate those kind of discussions, but you can only do it if you know who you have to please. But number two, we have to have clear thinking about who we are and who we aren't, and who it is that called us there for such a time as this. Again, many people go into ministry to get affirmation and acceptance because maybe they never got it growing up, or they haven't had it in life so far. They're really there for the wrong reasons. See, we must stand on the fact that we are there for a reason. Maybe not our reason, but God's reason. And it's not to always have things go well or be comfortable. Our talents and our skills, our personality and vision matter, but they don't have to be just like everyone else's. We need to just seek to be like Jesus, but maximize our gifts, not try to be somebody we're not. And in the process, we can admit our weaknesses too. We don't have to be afraid of that. We're also human because we want to matter. We want to be loved, but no person or accomplishment will ever be enough to do that, to fulfill us. Psalm 42 says, as the deer pants for water, so my soul longs for you, O God. See, we sometimes think that if I just do enough, if I do it wonderfully, then my longings will be met. Guess what? That won't work. Might feel like it for a while, but it will never be enough. That's why we always need to have more. We're going to let people down. We're going to make mistakes. But it's okay to be human. So accept that, like Dan Allender writes in a book title, Lead with a Limp. Because that's something true of all of us. We don't have to be perfect. Thirdly, our ultimate goal must be servant leadership. We're to lead our church, yes, but serve the people in the process. I don't know if you remember the story of King Rehoboam, and he's told about how to respond to Israel's complaints against him. They said, this has been too hard. You've got to cut back. Well, his elders said, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they'll always be your servants. Rehoboam, by the way, didn't listen to that advice, and his kingdom hit the fan. But see, if we just think that way, our major task is to serve just like Jesus did. That takes a lot of pressure off to do everything else perfectly. Fourthly, desire but don't demand. See, if we believe that resolving a conflict and winning the argument, is essential, then we're going to demand that issues always turn out a certain way. If we believe that our people all need to serve or act or whatever to a certain level, that our church will be okay and I'll look good and all that, well, we'll start bawling them out when they don't perform well enough. See, we can have high expectations, and we should, but we can't demand people meet them all. So what do? Well, you pray like crazy. You serve your people, as we mentioned in the last point. We be the best leaders we can be. We model what it means to grow in the word and share our faith and pray often and seek to do things with excellence. We grow leaders and we love our family and the people in that church passionately. But if we believe that our people must behave a certain way for us to be good enough and successful, then we'll demand things from them rather than just desire, and train them and pray for them. See, when we don't demand, we'll be able to do several things. We'll be willing to meet with those who don't see eye to eye with us. We'll have those discussions, as we said earlier. Or we'll say, give me more information. Somebody comes up and tells you something negative about you. Just say, really, tell me more about that. Doesn't mean you'll agree. It just means, hey, I'm willing to listen. I'm okay with that. Have a close friend, mentor, and team member who will also walk with you. You'll be free to do that because you don't mind having someone say, hey, you could do better here. In Ecclesiastes, we know that part where it says how tragic it is when somebody falls and has no one to pick them up. We'll also be free to take regular breaks from ministry. We'll refill our tank because the church will survive without us. And we'll also be free to make time with God practical and special. We'll let God work on us. And I think a logical outcome will also be that we'll take care of our bodies more carefully. See, I hope these few minutes have given you some things to think about. We haven't time to develop them all, but you take them and put them into your life. Look at what you need to do differently. What could you do better so that you stand on a firm foundation, especially when the hurricanes come? Thanks for listening. I'm Gary Sinclair.